Can you talk about some of the barriers that you did face coming up through wrestling here and also internationally?
I felt like when I was coming up in my career, I was figuring out all of this on my own. There really wasn't like a directed course for me. And I definitely believe that has everything to do with me being a woman in the sport. Like there was and of course, like we were the first to go to these colleges and everything. But I had to figure out all that by myself. Like I had to figure out what colleges have women's wrestling. I didn't know it was going to be freestyle. If you don't know, women wrestle freestyle in college wrestling. I didn't know who to talk to, who to reach out to. Whereas I feel like at the time, my male counterparts had that set. They knew what schools they wanted to go to. They had a good idea of what their future looked like in the sport. Whereas I felt like I was trying to make a name for myself and then also like figuring out the next steps. So competing and trying to figure out how long and how I was going to be able to keep doing this. I didn't know about the open tournaments, no clue. Showed up to college and was told, oh, yeah, you can do Sunkissed Open, which I don't think is a tournament anymore, but just had no clue what that was. And it was definitely a different experience than my male counterparts. They, like I said, had kind of a road for them or had someone helping them figure out. Whereas that just wasn't the reality for me. And I don't think it's the reality. It wasn't reality for the women years behind me. We're the ones that are giving them advice at the time on what to do next and how to proceed with your career if it's something you want to do.
When I wanted to join the high school team, I was the first to bring it up, I guess. So my dad and the head coach sat down and had like a meeting. And I think that Title IX made it easier for my coach, Dave Cloud, to do the right thing because he knew I don't know that he had really ever had to think about it before. And I'm sure he was not excited about the hassle it was going to bring with parents' opinions and administrators' opinions and other coaches. And then not to mention just what happens when you throw a girl into the mix on the boys' team, all of that stuff. But because he knew that I had a right to be there and that if I wanted to, we could, sue or do that kind of thing. It made it easier for him to do the right thing and to give me a chance, right, on the team. And so the fact that I was allowed to be there made it easier for me to get into the door. But actual application of what it's like, the experience of the first, you know, it wasn't established how it was actually going to go down, and so everybody was making it up, and so the mistakes were going to be made, and it was going to be rocky and a rough experience, and all of us that came had to be the ones who, despite not really being welcome there, and a lot of strong opinions about us being there or not being there, that we should or shouldn't be there. We were the ones that wanted to do it so bad that we did it anyway. And I'm glad that now it's getting to a point where they're trying to get more girls in the door. So you have to target a larger audience than the ones that'll do it despite all the reasons not to.
I mentioned earlier how I said that I didn't know that, I was the odd man out or the odd woman out. But I quickly found out that I was. It was a lot of discrimination. And being the only girl in the sport, the only girl in the room, the only girl in Northeastern Ohio, I thought that was normal. The discrimination became my norm, which is kind of sad to say and think about. But there were many times where I would go to a meet or I would go to a scrimmage, and they knew in advance that there was a girl on the team because there was always that comment like, "Oh, that's the team with that girl." That type of mentality. So it was often that I was getting dressed in bathrooms. They had to find a bathroom that I could get dressed in for a meet. Find someone who could help, who could actually do the officiate or the weigh-in for me. Different things like that. So many times where we would go to a scrimmage or an open mat, and I would have a partner, and then a coach would do something like this, or like, no, you're not wrestling with that girl. Some would be so bold as to be like, no, you're not wrestling with that girl. And I would have no partner. And then I had a crazy coach who would yell at me and be like, you need to have a partner at all times. And I was like, well, I had one, and then they're gone. So it was just a lot of quickly learning, or I guess quickly figuring out where my place was, where I thought my place was in this sport, and was that to be like the girl over in the corner who was just grateful to be there. And I think that's how I initially started out. But then me being me and my personality, I decided that I didn't want to be in the corner. I wanted to make my way to the center of that room. I wanted to make more opportunities for myself, because I felt like I should be there and I should have those opportunities. And why do these guys get this and I don't? That kind of mentality, and just kind of making a space for myself in these wrestling rooms, in these tournaments. So I think initially that's how my experience early on started off, as far as like being that girl on the team. It was a lot of discrimination, and so much so to the point where I thought that was the norm. Like I thought I was doing something wrong.
We also, from a time when women's and girls wrestling was seen, anything that we got was seen as at the expense of the men and boys. And so, my program, there wasn't like a separate girls team. The women's team at my college was the same as the men's team. And so any of our resources, all the resources were shared. And so if you're a boy who's been told their whole life that this is your opportunity, and now you have to share it, it was seen as taken away. Or this was back when we only had 4 weight classes. And so the addition of any weight classes, they took weight classes away from the men. So it was seen as it was our fault that men were losing opportunities. The same thing was happening in colleges. Rather than doing the right thing and rather than the focus being on creating opportunities, schools were doing the wrong thing and cutting programs. And they were cutting men's wrestling a lot. And rather than seeing us as a way to keep a program, to be compliant, many of the coaches and administrators chose to see us as it was our fault somehow that the administrators were choosing to cut men's teams rather than being like, all right, let's add a women's team.